Excuse me. Away with me. Mhm, mhm. Let's see. Ugh, I shouldn't be messing with my face when, you know, stuff's recording here. Oh my gosh. Something in my nose. It's like a hair. My hair's always ugly. Hi, Shannon. How are you? Hello. I've got to set up the chat. Got to set up the chat. I feel alive. Away with me. Coochie patchy. Coochie patchy. Coochie. Sounds like a drum rhythm. Coochie patchy. Coochie patchy. Coochie patchy. Boop, boop, boop. Coochie patchy. Sweet. How are you? It's great to see you. Good morning, Larissa, and good afternoon / early evening from Denver, Colorado. Let me move the chat here so we can see the chat too. I guess we just have to hide my silly face a little bit. Why does the camera always go out of focus? Sorry, this is just so wackadoodle. It drives me nuts. Things can't just. God damn it! Why can't I select? I swear to God. Here we go. Okay, there we go. Hello, Neen. How are you? How are you, Neen? Now, where is okay? Okay, let me do this one. Let me do this one. There we go. Oh, goodness. I'm just such a mess. Coochie patchy, coochie patchy, coochie patchy. So anyway, we're going to talk about Jupiter going into Taurus, and then we'll look at your charts. Well, we're going to go through horoscopes for each rising sign. So, so I'm going to try not to make this take too long because, I'm late. And I don't mean in a good way. Clean the lens. No, it's not the lens. It's the focus. It's the focus. Although I probably have lube on the lens because of my other job. But I cleaned all that off. I cleaned all that off. I should probably close that too. You come away with me. There we go. Now you can hear me so much better. So anyway, it's May 14th. It's Mother's Day. How are you mothers doing? My dad used to say mother is half a word. We only have 5 people. Tell your friends, like the stream, please. Aubrey, hello, sweetheart. Have your friends come. Or maybe they can watch later. Oh, hi, Twilight. It's been way too long, my sweet. It's been way too long, and it's my fault, of course. It is my fault. It is my fault. Everything's my fault. That's Nirvana. I have some sort of hair in my nose, and it won't go away. Anyway, so we see all this fun stuff. Anyway, Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day to everyone. My dad used to say mother's half a word because, the word motherfucker. So, that's what I think he was getting at anyway. He never said it outright, but that's what I thought he meant. So, well, I belong to that club too. So, but anyway, thank you so much. It's so funny because last night I took my daughter to frozen yogurt, and the woman at the cash register, she was so sweet. She must have been like 55, 56. And she was trying to tell us about specials and all that sort of thing, or customer stuff. I will turn you off, you foul creature. And And then as we were leaving and we got rung up and everything, she's like, hey, happy Mother's Day to you or whoever or to Dad. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's so sweet. She's at least trying to make an effort. Because I think most people, well, not most, but a good cross section of people are pretty cool. But, they just, it's unusual for them. It's unusual. And I am so unusual, just like Cyndi Lauper. But we're going to talk Taurus now and Jupiter. So, because this is really interesting. In just a few days, Tuesday, the 26th. The 26th, Jupiter is going to make his ingress into Taurus. Why is this so cool? Well, Jupiter stays in a sign for about a year. So this is very cool because he's a big planet changing signs. And so he will probably make a big splash in general, but also in our individual lives, depending on the house placement in our chart. And since you all know I do whole sign houses, and that's how we do horoscopes, and quite frankly, I will tell people, hey, you can look at this for both your rising sign and your sun sign, but really, it's mostly the rising. It's really mostly the rising because it's the house placements that matter. I'm going to put my headphones in because I can't get the proper, what's it called? Sound space. It's hard to tell the spatial sound. And so it really, see, there we go. Now I can hear what I'm saying and what I'm doing. And, well, anyway, let's get back to it because my ADD is terrible. Hey, girl. Hi, Alicia. Hi, Larissa. And it was yesterday because you're in the future. That's right. You must be in Oz or Old Zealand. So, the Pando, hello, girl. What's up? I should make another post that I'm live because, what's going on? What's going on? And it's Jupiter time. It's Jupiter time. Jupiter, Jupiter, Jupiter. And I do voice, so. We are live now, exclamation point. Horoscopes for Jupiter entering Taurus, exclamation point. Okay. And so there we go. So it's just a few days. And this is a big momentous event. Because like I said, Jupiter stays in a sign for about a year. And he's got about a 12-year cycle. And there's a few things that I noticed that are quite interesting about that, especially regarding current events. I probably should have made this explicit on the graphic to try and get more traffic on this stupid video. But anyway, maybe I'll, download this later and edit it, but I really don't want to. So anyway, so you see Jupiter here is at 29 degrees 35 today, 35 minutes. And let's go ahead just a day. Oh, look how close he is. Let's go ahead another day. Oh, look, he joined in. He's only 3 minutes in, right? So, we don't need to see the exact ingress, but it's May 16th. It's Tuesday. Now, I was thinking of some archetypal meanings here. Oh, happy Mother's Day, first house Taurus Jupiter and first house Taurus rising. Well, that's wonderful. You're having your Jupiter return in your first house. It's a momentous year for you. That's a wonderful part of the cycle. And to have it be a Venus-ruled sign. How old are you, by the way? How old are you? Tell me your exact age, if you would, Roxy, so I can get the profection year, the annual profection year, if you want. Anyway, I'll keep going. And if you post it, you post it. But you can see the ingress here, which is quite interesting, isn't it? Because we've had a bunch of eclipses, right? That went from Taurus and Scorpio into Aries. So it's interesting because that area of your life has, 35. So you're in for I'm sorry, darling. It's a 12th house year. So Aries, it's a 12th house year ruled by Mars. If you were born during the day, this year is going to suck for you. And I know because I had a similar one. Because I had a 12th house year ruled by Saturn. And I have a night chart. And it was a pretty crappy year. You know, I got divorced. I got kicked out of my house and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's often a difficult year, especially if it's ruled by a malefic. So in your case, so for anyone watching Annual Perfections, we'll have to do another episode or whatever on that. But it's an ancient timing technique where each year of your life, from the year of your birth on, separated by birthdays, right, is ruled by a house. So when you're 0 years old, it's the first house. When you're 12 years old, again, it's the first house, right? When you're 1 year old, it's the second house. And we go around the wheel. Every 12 years, we get back to the first house. The ruler of that house or sign, because we have to use whole sign houses for this, is called the Time Lord for the year. And those transits of that particular traditional planet will be the most important for you for that year. For example, I'm in a 4th house year and I moved to a new state. You know, it's a Venus-ruled year. So, I mean, things haven't been that bad, but you see, so anyway, just be prepared that it could be a difficult year for you. So anyway, but I was thinking about Jupiter ingressing into Taurus symbolically and what it can mean. We're going to look at some of the meaning and some key phrases that I thought of that sort of, you know, indicate that meaning. And then we're going to look at events through history. I mean, just a few, hopefully. You know me, I'm a history nerd. And then we're going to look at horoscopes for each rising sign. And then for a few lucky people, we will do charts. So anyway, I have to drink my salt water, as you know, because if I don't have the salt water, I get, you know, because I'm a salty girl. Anyway. So, Jupiter, like we said, it's on Tuesday. So what's Jupiter? Who's Jupiter? Well, he's one of my daddies. I have my 3 dads. I have Saturn, Jupiter, and I guess the sun. I guess. Because he's dad. Well, so Jupiter's abundance. He rules prosperity. He's luck. He's the primary benefic. For those of you with date charts, he's your sect benefic, which means he's your nicest planet, especially if he's well dignified. If he's not, well, you got some more difficult things to put up with. Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Pisces, and we can see his significations imported a bit into those signs. Jupiter rules priesthoods, religion, right? He rules rank and lofty positions. He rules wise people, sages. He's also philosophers, right? Meaning of things. He finds his joy in the 11th house, right? The 11th house was the pleasures of the mind, right? Like aspirations and optimism, visions for the future, right? It only later became friends because those are the people that help us, friends and benefactors. Whereas the 5th house, where Venus finds her joy, and we're talking about her because Taurus is a Venus-ruled sign. So the 5th house was the pleasures of the flesh, right? So enjoyment, things that we do to have fun, which includes sex, which is how we make children, right? So that's why those 2 wonderful things are included in the 5th house, and why the 5th house was initially those 2 things. But along with pleasure, we'll see things like sports. We'll see small business people. We'll see comedy. We'll see performers, right? Venus rules art and music. We'll see musical performers and stage performers and things like that come out of that house. People who write stories, who express truth through beauty. And I think it was Shakespeare, right? Was it Shakespeare? In one of those plays where he spoke about the beauty of truth and the truth of beauty. And there's that alternate argument that, well, sometimes the truth is ugly and harsh and disgusting. I would venture to say that even that is beautiful. When we dispel darkness, which is illusion, what dark just hides things, right? We're not talking about good or bad or any bullshit like that. We're just talking about awareness, right? As we become more and more aware of how things are, of how we are, right? We can more easily let go of the nonsense. So anyway, that's a whole other thing. So the interesting thing about Taurus is it's also sort of an optimistic. Before I go to that, let me finish my thought about the fifth house. So if we think about the 11th house and the Jupiterian influence as being more philosophical or having to do with the pleasure and the good things of the mind. It was called the house of the good daimon, which is the good spirit. Whereas the 12th house was the house of the bad spirit. And the fifth house was the house of the good fortune, whereas the sixth house was the house of the bad fortune, like injuries and illnesses, whereas fifth house is sex and fun. So let's think about Jupiter in a sort of Venus-ruled environment. Well, what's Venus? Right? Venus is Our Lady of Beauty, as we often say, of love, of pleasure, femininity, right? She rules women, which means she rules reproductive things. She also rules sex and sex organs. I mean, both Mars and Venus do in different ways, but we think about Venus as that sort of feminine desire, pleasure, nature, right? Whereas Mars is that, gimme, right? Whereas Mars rules more like love affairs and, a bit more aggressive and forceful. So anyway, Taurus is also an earth sign, obviously. So Taurus is the feminine, right? Because Taurus was a feminine sign, meaning, the earth and water signs were considered yin or feminine, meaning more passive than active. And we don't have to use gendered terms anymore. A lot of astrologers often use the terms yin and yang. Pardon me. They often use the terms yin and yang. So rather than male and female or, masculine and feminine signs, because, all these things are sort of arbitrary in a way, but it's a polarity because where we're at, we're ruled by dualities, by relativity, right? Everything's relative. So anyway, we'll get through this. So Taurus is also a sign of abundance because it's that place in the solar cycle where light finally wins over dark. And we think about all the growth that's happening in Taurus. Yes, the vernal equinox, right, is Aries. So it's the beginning when things are starting to sprout. But the abundance, like the greenery, really becomes obvious. Now, I mean, it depends on where you are, but, we think about Taurus season, April going into May is that, the May flowers, if you will. Right? April showers bring May flowers. So that whole Taurus season is almost like the sprouting of flowers, the flowering, It's not quite fruition, but there's that sort of abundance thing that's in there too. So some phrases that I thought about, right? Because Jupiter is spiritual. He's the priest and all this sort of thing. And Taurus is about making things concrete, right? We use the word manifestation all the time, but it just bothers me because so many new age idiots throw it around like, like a Nerf ball. Stupid simile, gosh. I'm usually like quick with the similes and metaphors, but it's Mother's Day. Not that that's an excuse, but I'm going to use it. So anyway, Taurus, a Venus-ruled sign about beauty, femininity, yeah? It also has to do with making things real and concrete. It's a fixed sign, so it sustains things, right? But it's also hard to get going. It's also hard to start. A couple of phrases I wrote down were the beauty of the spiritual nature, right? Expressing truth, Jupiter, whether that's spiritual to you or not, doesn't matter. But expressing truth through beauty, whether that's through artistic expression of some sort, right? Through great oratory. Venus isn't typically oratory, but we think of Venus as beautiful and beauty. Mercury might be the orator, but Venus makes things pretty, pretty, pretty. When you see Venus in either in conjunction, trine, or sextile, when you see Mercury either trine, I lost my train of thought, either trine, conjunction, or sextile to Venus, it often gives a great singing voice or a nice speaking voice. I have Mercury sextile Venus. I don't think I have a great voice, but other people say they like listening to me, so I don't know. But you'll see people who often sing pretty well too. So Venus makes things beautiful. Taurus is also about beauty. Doesn't mean every Taurus is beautiful necessarily, but everyone's beautiful in some way. So we think about spiritual truths or philosophical ideas, these sorts of things expressed through some sort of artistic endeavor or made beautiful in some way. So a couple other phrases I came up with are meaning or teaching, because Jupiter is the teacher expressed through beauty or through drama in some way. We'll see ritual, right? Ritual is a beautiful way to express our religious impulse or our spirituality or our understanding of truths. Invocation is sort of like a combination of the Venusian and Jupiterian energy, whereas Venus brings things down. Jupiter is the precipitator, right? Ruling Sagittarius, we think about the symbol of Sagittarius. It's the arrow perched upon the bow, which is aimed at the royal star Arcturus in mythology. It's like the rain cloud of knowable things that the arrow penetrates and causes to precipitate. Jupiter enters into the unknown. I forget who it was, but a famous astrologer said when we're working with Jupiter, we're in the realm of mystery, whatever that means. Again, philosophical truths, uncovering the mysteries of the universe. It's all very ninth house sort of stuff, but anyway, that's another thing. Excuse me. The other thing is the material nature of Taurus. And Jupiter can be a bit gaudy. Jupiter likes to blow things up. He exacerbates things. He stirs things up. He makes things bigger, right? Let's not pussyfoot around here. He makes things bigger. When you're having Jupiter pass through your first house, you sometimes gain a little bit of weight. I know I did. But then Saturn quickly entered, and then, I went to Miss Skeletor again. So, and that's not to say you should lament or fear Jupiter going in the first house. It's not always like that. It's also a surge of confidence, right? It's a surge of, it sort of enlivens us a little bit. So, although, like I said, Saturn was following mine, so it wasn't the best period. Excuse me. I'm sorry. The other thing is material spirituality, right? Iconography, having religious icons or statues, art, right? Religious music. Now, I can't stand, I'm sorry if I offend anyone, but I can't stand evangelical rock. I had to go to to church services a couple of times where they had the rock music, and I was raised Catholic, so that's just strange to me. I can't do it. I need solemn, right? It needs to be very solemn and very high church, right? So anyway, but that's a whole other thing. Jupiter likes nice things. I mean, Venus likes nice things, but Jupiter, along in a Venus-ruled sign, Taurus, is notorious for liking nice things. I make this joke, like nothing says I love you to Taurus Venus like leaving the price tag on, right? Because they want to know the value of what you put into it. Not always. It's sort of a joke, but I get it from some personal experience. So nice things, gold chains, right? Venus rules gold. I mean, the sun rules gold, but Venus rules precious metals, rather. So, in nice stones and things like that. I thought of the word big love, right? Whatever house he's going into for you, Think about big love. What are you expressing a new desire or aspiration for? What else did I say? Insatiable desires, because Venus is desire and Jupiter blows it up, which can lead to self-indulgence, overusing our leisure time, being lazy and, stewing in our own stuff or partaking in a little too much, Venusian pleasure. So I know I can't get enough. So, prayer, rites. Oh, the other thing too that I've seen come up through my historical research, sexual philosophy, right? Venus and Jupiter, sex philosophy. I keep mentioning Venus just because Taurus is a Venus ruled sign, right? And Taurus is a very sensual sign, the materiality of pleasure, right? Whereas Libra, the other Venus ruled sign, is an air sign. It more has to do with the ideas of it all, the Venusian ideas of relationship and how we relate to each other, right? So anyway, another thing I noticed was population growth. Some sports records, actually records in general, women's rights stuff, and even nonviolent actions. So, what's funny is some celebrities that have Jupiter and Taurus. Number one is Mahatma Gandhi, right? Which is very interesting because he was a teacher of peace. I mean, he was first a lawyer, which is sort of Jupiterian too, in a way. I guess solar, right? The sun is, the law. But a teacher of peace, certainly. Of liberation. He was working towards the Indian liberation movement, and his philosophy centered around nonviolence, which is a very sort of Jupiter in a Venus ruled sign thing, especially, we think of Libra too, but Taurus also, right? Bringing inaction, or rather than inaction, I would say more bringing calm, right, to conflict. So we often see conflict exacerbated while Jupiter's going through Aries oftentimes. Like I said, Jupiter blows things up. But we have this brief respite sometimes of prosperity while Jupiter goes through Taurus. But for the United States, some interesting things happen once Jupiter goes into Gemini, and it usually has to do with finance, and not in a good way. So, the other thing that's interesting about that is Martin Luther King Jr. also had Jupiter in Taurus, right? And he was inspired by Gandhi. Yeah. And he was another teacher of peace in a way. He had to deal with terrible conflicts and violent situations to be true. But he was also part of a liberation movement, right? Civil rights. And part of his philosophy was also nonviolence. Although towards the end, he was getting quite frustrated with that philosophy, but that's a whole nother thing. So, excuse me. People like, JFK. He was pursuing peace. Now, he was also pursuing pleasure, as we know. Good old Gemini. But he also had terrible health problems that made him a bit more aware of things than your average Joe, and oftentimes the pain and suffering is what makes us more compassionate, as I often say. And he did give a famous peace speech where he talked about reducing world armaments and, not a Pax Americana, he said, but rather a global peace. So it was very interesting. He enunciated that note towards the end of his life, because he was a Cold Warrior before. So Robert Downey Jr. was one I wrote down because self-indulgence a little. Well, he had an issue with it, He's gotten famous again and is sort of, a sage figure in Hollywood. Courtney Love, hedonism, abuse. I put Andy Warhol down, and also Pablo Picasso. Andy Warhol, because of the hedonism thing to a certain extent, right? It was the party scene of New York, right? And then he was a celebrity artist. The whole idea of celebrity artists. Pablo Picasso was a celebrity artist, right? of sorts. Excuse me. John Lennon, celebrity artist, musician, of course. And he had Jupiter in Taurus. Now, remember the famous phrase, you may say I'm a dreamer, right? I thought that was very indicative of Jupiter in Taurus, right? In a Venus-ruled sign, having a dream or a vision of peace, right? Or relating to each other, right? Because Venus isn't just romantic relationships. I venture to say she's relationship in general. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting. So just a few, right? I mentioned a few themes that we see. Now, just looking back at a few historical events that can help us understand what we might see coming up here. And this is important for all of us because now this encompasses our material lives, which, right? One of my mentors said to me, if you have to choose between the spiritual life and the daily material life, you always choose the daily life. Like Christ said, he who is faithful in least is faithful in much. If you can't handle the shit of your daily life, how are you going to handle the craziness of the spiritual life where things are even more uncertain and where things are a bit more nebulous and it requires more attention and more awareness and more effort and more conscious pain and suffering? I'm sorry to say, but that's what's in store. But it's also perfect joy. Well, I mean, I don't know all about that, but I know a little teeny bit. So unemployment rates, this is something we'll often see. Well, I call this economic abundance, which is something we often see with Jupiter entering Taurus. So we'll see, in particular, unemployment rates fall. So for example, right, 1928 was when Jupiter was in Taurus, 1928. That date will sound sort of interesting to some of you who are familiar with American history, particular financial history. So the unemployment rate fell to way low, 1.6%, which is very low, right? We usually account for an average of 5% unemployment. So is my understanding in general in a capitalist economy. So 1.6%. It fell in 1926 and remained that way apparently until 1929, where it rose a little bit to 3%. Right. 1928 was a pretty prosperous year. The same thing happened in the year 2000. Unemployment dropped to 3.8%, which was the lowest since 1969. We had the most people working, apparently, that we'd ever had, nearly 65%. Unemployment now, also as a rubric, here's 3.4%. Which is even lower than it was in 2000. So we have very low unemployment according to most standards right now. So now the weird thing about these is they tend to be followed by Jupiter going into Gemini, which is, the seventh house of the United States, which means it's opposite the first house, which makes that what? Sagittarius. So having the ruler of the first house of Sagittarius be Jupiter in its sign of exile or detriment, Gemini, because Jupiter rules Sag, so the opposite sign is called exile or detriment, where he's not happy. This is an essential dignity, which we'll have another talk on at some point, because you all need some dignity. Essentially, maybe accidentally. I'm accidentally dignified. I mean, symbolically or facetiously, I guess. Excuse me. Now, another example of, Gemini, right? Jupiter in Gemini is not having fun. And being the ruler of the first house often indicates difficult times. Jupiter was in Gemini in 1929, right? 1928 was the year before the stock market crash. And we had some record abundance. We had record crop yields. We had farmers charging record amounts for their crops. Agricultural prices went up. Stocks were inflated, railroad stocks especially, People were buying stocks on margins. I think it was railroad stocks anyway. But people were buying stocks on margins, which is essentially like credit, right? If you have like 10% of the money, you put it up as collateral and they give you the rest to buy whatever you want. And you're supposed to pay it back, which is called a margin call. If I remember the movie Trading Places correctly. But so we had an unemployment crisis once we had the stock market crash, didn't we? At one point, I believe unemployment went up to 25%. And of course, this was a more protracted event, which took longer than just a year or two, right? Jupiter only stays in a sign for about a year. But it is interesting to note that we've seen unemployment crises once Jupiter goes into Gemini. So it's just interesting to remember here because this will happen probably following the election, and it's just something to watch. And for example, in 2001, another example, unemployment went up from 2000 when it was record low. It went up to 1.6. It went up 1.6 percentage points to 5.6%, which added 2 million more people out of work, right? Which totaled 8 million people out of work. We're forecasting now raising interest rates to result in maybe 10 million people out of work. So we'll see what happens with all that. But, we're just talking about this as forecasting for what could happen. So in 1952, same thing. We had great unemployment, 2.7%. It went up almost 50% by 2 percentage points to 4.5% once Jupiter went into Gemini in 1953, right? And then we talked about the stock market crash. So, hello, Alyssa. Oh, you love my voice. Thank you. Hi, Allison. Oh, it's going to be quite an experience. Yeah. Well, I'm liking this because then it'll go into Gemini where it's not so fun, right? But it's my 5th house, so I'm hoping for abundance of romantic things, I have plenty. Well, I have one child, which is plenty. So, anyway, so population booms, right? The baby boom started in the 50s, didn't it? Well, following World War II, but it reached its height around 1952, right? When Jupiter was in Taurus. There was a surge in population too, that was reported in the 2000 census. In the year 2000, again, when Jupiter was in Taurus. So that's sort of interesting to me. The other thing, too, going along with the economic stuff is overvaluing and inflation. I mean, we're having sort of an inflationary crisis right now, but we're going into probably more. Interest rates were hiked oftentimes under Jupiter in Taurus, right? We know they hiked them during 1929. That was during Jupiter in Gemini, though. But during Jupiter and Taurus in the year 2000, interest rate hike. Of course, there was another stock market or financial crisis that happened in 2001, the dot-com bubble burst, right? Those of you familiar with the 90s again might remember Enron and WorldCom and that whole thing that sort of blew up and, right, still continued to cause problems into 2001. We talked about inflated stock prices already. We talked about, this is so interesting. So I kept running into presidential primaries in the United States while Jupiter's in Taurus. And it seems like every 12 years, a presidential primary and oftentimes an election falls when Jupiter's in Taurus. In particular, it's the primaries. And I went through how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's all of these 8 primaries were Jupiter in Taurus. So, for example, 1928, the election of 1928, it was Herbert Hoover, right, who was the former Secretary of Commerce, and Al Smith, who was the Democratic governor of New York. They won their primaries and went on to the presidential election, right? we'll just briefly mention some of these because it's so funny. It's so funny. Right. Who else? Well, let's jump to 1952. Eisenhower and Adlai Stevenson win their respective primaries. Right. 1964, Lyndon Johnson and Barry Goldwater. 1976, Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford. 1988, George H.W. Bush and Michael Dukakis, right? The year 2000, Bush and Gore. Remember that one? 2012, Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. They won their respective primaries. Now, where are we now? 2024. And it looks like it's going to be Trump and I'm probably Biden, but we don't know. There's all sorts of things going on. But it looks like it's probably Trump from the Republican side. I just thought that was so interesting. There's something weird about these Jupiter and Taurus primaries, right? I've got to dig deeper into this, but they tend to be at pivotal times, right? We think about 1928, right before the stock market crash. And Herbert Hoover was renowned for doing nothing, right? And it was he that created all the sentiment that went towards FDR, right? Towards remaking the economic system of sorts. 1952, Eisenhower and Adlai Stevenson. Eisenhower really escalated the Cold War, didn't he? Well, Truman especially, but under Eisenhower, we had the most rabid anti-communists, the Dulles brothers, John Foster Dulles and Allen Dulles. This is not a history lesson. I'm so sorry. Anyway, 1976, right? This is right before another labor crisis. And also the overproduction crisis of the 1970s. There was very high unemployment. So it's just very interesting to me that these are all sort of pivotal times in history. Anyway, we'll move on. Gosh, these are all sort of interesting times. We also have lots of world records that happen and get broken. The world's tallest buildings, the Petronas Towers, again, Jupiter and Taurus in 1999. Venus Williams wins Wimbledon, the US Open, and an Olympic gold medal. She became the first Black woman ever to be ranked number 1 in singles tennis. And that's pretty pivotal. Amelia Earhart was the first woman to complete a transatlantic flight in 1928. This wasn't the famous nonstop flight of 1932, but it was the first transatlantic flight by a woman and the second one ever. Also, we had the first trans-Pacific flight by a couple of dudes, Charles Smithy Kingsford and Charles Ulm, the Chucksters. Lance Armstrong won his first Tour de France in 1999. Another interesting. We see lots of these sports records and things like that come up. Also moves towards liberation, nonviolence, right? MLK Jr., Martin Luther King Jr. won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964 when Jupiter was in Taurus. We had the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which made discrimination on the basis of, race, creed, sex, whatever, illegal. So we also had the Kellogg-Briand Pact of 1928, which was very idealistic. It basically outlawed war, right? It was signed by 65 countries, but then not soon after that, of course, Germany started acting up again. So liberation movements. We talked about the Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act, again, prohibits discrimination. It was also very important because it was also implicit in hiring, promoting, and firing. So in the workplace. I also wrote down the philosophy of love and sex because in 1928 also we had the founding of the World League for Sexual Reform by Dr. Hirschfeld, who I believe was the German doctor of that famous sex clinic in Germany that was destroyed by Nazis, essentially, by the Nazi Party. It was essentially the beginnings of sexology as a major field of study. I mean, the real beginnings were in the 19th century, but we saw it really start to proliferate here. The other thing we saw in terms of sexual liberation, but this is a sad story. U.S. Army soldier Barry Winchell was unalived by fellow soldiers for having a relationship with a transgender showgirl named Calpurnia Adams. And this was in 1999. The rights of women. We'll see events around the rights of women. For example, the UK Parliament passed the Equal Franchise Act, which gave women equal voting rights of men, because, there was an act that happened before that, but it was just like property owning women and stuff like that. But this gave it to all women and gave men and women equal voting rights. Another thing that happened was a case called, this is in 1965, Griswold v. Connecticut. This was argued in front of the Supreme Court in 1965, when Jupiter was in Taurus. And this essentially gave the right to married couples to use contraception, because that was illegal in Connecticut at the time. Now, what's interesting about this is a certain group of people are trying to make all these things illegal again, right? There's a push for, a national abortion ban, coming from a certain party. There's also a push for getting rid of no-fault divorce, right? And some are even advocating making contraception illegal. I mean, this is batshit crazy, my loves. So, what can we expect to see now? We talked about some of it, right? Hopefully we see a big pushback, towards sexual liberation, women's rights, and hopefully transgender rights, because that's a big deal happening right now. Maybe we see moves towards peace. We have a war going on in Ukraine right now and a threat of even more, right? Maybe we'll see nonviolent protests proliferate around the world. That's often something that happens while Jupiter is in Taurus. Maybe we'll see, we already see low unemployment, but people are still suffering. 60% of the country is living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe we'll see economic growth, though. The sad thing is that it often turns around or backwards once Jupiter goes into Gemini. So again, world records. Maybe we'll see world sports records. I don't know. Seeing world records set. And of course, we're going to see more presidential primaries, right? We already know that's going to happen. Well, so let's look at some horoscopes here and see what it means for you. But like we said, some key phrases, learning to express your own truth in a beautiful way, learning to speak your truth. Or, we think of Mercury as having to do, or Gemini or Virgo. Mercury ruled signs to do more with speaking, writing, and expressing. Excuse me. But with Venus, we still do art. We weave truth into beauty of some sort. And we do that through different media, whether it's painting, poetry, and Venus rules poetry, or beautiful prose, metaphor, simile. All these things are very Venusian, you see. Although Mercury does link things, of course. But Venus creates the relationship. Venus creates the relationship. So anyway, let's go to Aries rising. Excuse me. But it is time to enjoy yourself, or to find ways to enjoy yourself again. You may see luck in that particular house that Jupiter's going into. And there's spiritual dimensions to the whole thing too, because Jupiter is our spirituality and does represent a little bit of how we express that. And having Jupiter go into Taurus, right, he'll bring in those significations into that house. So we'll see an opportunity here, as I said, right, to make some of our values a reality, right? This is time to live our truth, to make things concrete, to make things real for ourselves, to express things through ritual and rites. Excuse me. Ritual, very Venusian, and also that combination of the Jupiter nature with a Venusian type sign. So anyway, now we'll get to horoscopes. Let's start with Aries here. Let's start with Aries. Hours. Oh, excuse me. Oh, I shouldn't be yawning in the mic like that. That's terrible. If I was a better person, I would edit that out. But, lazy. Mercury and Taurus. So if you're Aries rising, Jupiter's going to be entering your second house, which is the house of livelihood, of, our finances, our money, our material possessions, our stuff. It does represent our work or jobs insofar as that's how we get our livelihood, where we get our money from. Right? And for you, Jupiter rules your 9th house because it's Aries, and also your 12th house. So Jupiter will import some of those things. You could, hopefully we would see some sort of material or financial benefit from Jupiter being in your second house. But it can also be a little bit of over-optimism when it comes to some of those things too. We might have a little tendency to overdo it or to make some big purchases. So just be aware of that. But we're bringing in the energy of the 9th house, which often has to do with legal affairs in the law or justice in some way, because it's the joy of the sun. So we import a lot of solar significations into this house, which is where it gets that sort of justice from. And the fact that the sun god was sort of our prototypical god, right? That gave that meaning to the 9th house. Oh, but we got to speed this up a little bit. So anyway, you might see money coming from a legal affair. You might see money coming from, either a religious endeavor or something to do with school, right? You might see refunds or student loans or something like that mitigated some way. But hopefully either, hopefully either your financial situation is improved or your expenses are mitigated in some way so you can save a little bit more. Savings is an important thing for Jupiter entering the second house, learning to save money, right? We think of things like foreign investment with 9th house. I doubt anyone here is making foreign investments, but you think about exotic things or foreign things influencing your financial situation in some way, whatever that means. There are many different ways that it can manifest. But let's go ahead now to Taurus rising. So Jupiter's entering your first house here. Excuse me, you're coming out of a 12th house year, which Jupiter going to the 12th house. It's not terribly isolating, but it's sort of like needing to lick your wounds in peace, away from people. It's not wanting to be tied to drama. It's wanting to contemplate on your own. It's removing yourself, right? To become a metaphysician. I'm thinking of the movie Don Juan DeMarco, when he's out in the forest, contemplating the meaning of life, all that sort of stuff. Removing yourself from the ricketa racketa, as I often call it. Then Jupiter enters your first house. We talked about the joke about gaining weight, which it may or may not be, but it is a time for increased confidence. Events may happen in your life that all of a sudden tell you, yeah, you can do that. For me, it was learning to be a professional astrologer or accepting the fact that I could do that for money or professionally. So expect something in your life, like something that you identify with. All of a sudden see a surge, either in your knowledge, your understanding, because Jupiter's understanding, it's the meaning. But Jupiter also rules your 8th house, right? So we're bringing things about death in there too, and fear. So overcoming what we thought we were, our fears about ourselves, our misconceptions about ourselves. And we also have the 11th house here. So getting help from friends and allies when it comes to your newfound goals and aspirations for yourself. or your newfound understanding of yourself, because you've gone through this contemplation phase and it's time to express what you've learned. So anyway, let's move on to Gemini. So Gemini in the first house. That means Jupiter is going into your 12th house, right? Which is this time now when we've moved out of the 11th house of Aries for you, right? Which may have been quite exhausting. Well, not so much for a Gemini, but usually this would entail doing lots of things, seeing lots of people, being involved in lots of things. It could be being involved. Oftentimes we see an endeavor or a project or something finally come to fruition, or we see the people that will help us with that. But you see, we have all this whirlwind of activity that then moves in to that phase of needing to think and contemplate. It's a year-long phase. A year-long phase where you have to accept the fact that you're not sure what's going on and you need to wait for clarity. This is a patience phase. It's a waiting phase. It's a reflective phase. It's where we think about, oh gosh, excuse me. What does this all matter? And it leads right into the first house phase next. So now for you, that's Gemini. So that might be a difficult phase, right? Where you're challenged on your understanding of yourself. And for Gemini rising, it's your 7th house ruler. And it's also your 10th house ruler, which is, again, why I say the prominent thing also, too. Jupiter going into your first house. Coming out of that 12th house isolation or, self-imposed seclusion into sort of the light of day where we start to see things turn around a little bit. We start to become aware. Confidence comes from actually doing things. And this is where we start to do things. Oftentimes in the 12th house phase, we face difficult parts of ourselves. It's the house of bad spirit, right? It's the joy of Saturn, which is why it has to do with exile and pain and suffering and mental illness and addiction, right? The things that tie us or that have to do with self-undoing. Excuse me. But there's also a healing quality behind seclusion in the right circumstances. So anyway, let's move on, shall we? So Cancer rising, that means Jupiter's going into your 11th house. So you're in that 11th house phase where optimism is starting to happen again. Hopefully you've had some healthy activity in the 10th house over the past year. Maybe you had a promotion. Maybe you got a new job. Maybe you got a raise. Maybe you got an award or some recognition. Maybe you felt like, wow, I finally know what I want to do. Oftentimes there might be a sense of like, I'm not sure which way to go or what my life direction is. And Jupiter enters and we serendipitously find a way that draws our attention. Excuse me. Now, Jupiter entering the 11th house gives the environment around us to achieve our goals, right? It gives us a certain level of optimism and a certain amount of forward thinking regarding our aspirations. But even more importantly, it brings around the people that can help us achieve those goals and aspirations, which is why the 11th house is friends, benefactors, and I like to say fans, right? People who help us along our way. And of course, Jupiter rules the 9th house. So it might be something to do with spirituality, right? It might be something to do with religion or the law, right? Or justice in some way. It may have to do with your school. It may have to do with learning in some way or teaching in some way. So, excuse me. Saturn is going through your 9th house, so that's quite interesting. You see, Jupiter's going to be ruling Pisces, of course, and Saturn is touring Pisces. So there's going to be this Saturnian quality along with the Jupiterian quality, interestingly enough, in that house, right? So at the same time, There might be exciting stuff regarding your worldview. There's also very difficult stuff. And having your worldview shattered can be very difficult. Now, this is also the 6th house being represented here. So just watch out about making enemies. You always want to act with integrity here. You might be tempted, right, to cut corners or to screw someone over. Maybe not overtly, but like, oh gosh, it would just be so easy. So much easier if I didn't tell this person something. And then it comes back to bite you in the butt later because the 6th house is enemies, right? So anyway, let's move on here. Leo rising, one of my favorites. So Jupiter's entering the 10th house, right? Here, which is a time of prosperity. And it's so funny because we think of Jupiter and Taurus as a prosperous time in general. And it's conjunct your very elevated, or sorry, it's conjunct a very elevated moon in Taurus here. Excuse me. And of course, approaching a new moon, right? We have a new moon in Taurus sort of right off the bat there. Once Jupiter, goes in. Go, 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 go. So anyway, so this is sort of a prosperous time, as I was saying. Hopefully this is a time when you get recognized by authorities, or you get Jupiter's rank. So that's why we say things like promotions, right? Because it's an increased rank. We can see things, we already talked about raises and material prosperity, right? Material, raises, of course. We talked about recognition, awards, things like that. Getting a new job. Looking as though you are a prosperous type person, that you can bring prosperity to whatever employer you settle at. Excuse me. So, and it's coming out of the 9th house, where perhaps your philosophy on things changed, right? You got a new set of truths. And you've brought this new understanding into the 10th house, where hopefully you can put it into manifestation. You can put what you learned into good use. For something concrete, something you have to actually do and produce. Jupiter rules the 8th house, right? Of, other people's money, death, debt, taxes. So maybe someone pays you back. Maybe someone passes away, an opportunity comes up. That's so morbid, but But see, this is also a time when Saturn's in the 8th house, and you have to watch out for, the potential of going into debt or having to deal with sizable debt. Jupiter also rules the 5th house. So you see, this is also a wonderful time to get yourself noticed by the kind of, sex partners you're interested in. It's also a time where your children might get prominent if you have children, or have some lucky things happen in some way. The 10th house is also the mother. You could see some luck with the mother. Why is the 10th house the mother? Because it's opposite the 4th, which is the father. I know modern astrologers say, the 4th house is the mother because it's Cancer. It's Cancer. No, the 4th house isn't Cancer. The 4th house isn't Cancer. No, it's not. It gets its meaning elsewhere. And you can look that up in my video on where the houses get their meanings. So, like the stream. 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 Anyway, so Leo rising, we talked about that. Let's move on. Shall we? Excuse me. I always get Yanni on here. Not the musician Yanni, but yawning. So anyway, now for Virgo rising, Jupiter's entering your 9th house. This is where our worldviews often change, where we get into different modes of thinking and understanding the world. When Jupiter's going through here, it doesn't feel so bad. We often meet a teacher or find a book series or a particular author or a YouTuber, or astrologer who presents us with new ideas and can offer us, a new way of looking at things. It sort of influences our worldview or spiritual values or politics or, legal understandings in some way, understanding of justice, what constitutes justice. And that often, coincides with your political beliefs, which we won't get into. So that means Jupiter is coming out of the 8th house, where again, hopefully he was cleaning up some of your financial situation, maybe even some of your fears. Oftentimes, fear is really sort of a staple feature of the 8th house. And, when we go through that sense of having to face our fears through Jupiter, he then enters the 9th house, where we have a new understanding that came out of surmounting certain fears, right? And then we have to assimilate that into a new worldview or spiritual values or philosophical values in general. So anyway, the 4th house is represented here too. So this could bring in, not just the father, but maybe the parents or the grandparents too. Significations into the 9th house. So they may prevail in a legal affair or something to do with religion. Or you may have increased dealings with them over the next year. If you don't usually see your parents or deal with your parents, you may be seeing more of them over the next year. Jupiter also rules your 7th house of partnerships, right? And also your 4th house. Oh, we talked about the 4th house of parents already. So the other thing too, right? Romantic partners, spouses, boyfriends, girlfriends, NB friends. Excuse me. You might meet someone over the next year, which is sort of interesting because Saturn is also going through your 7th house. It's where we see relationships get strained. So perhaps for many Virgo risings, we're going to see them meet new people. And I'd expect it to be people who share their philosophical values or their worldview or their politics for these Virgo risings. So let's move on to Libra. Another Venus ruled sign. So this means Jupiter's going into your 8th house, which hopefully will be cleaning up your debt situation, right? Could be your fears, as we talked about for the last person. Could also be death, right? Coming to terms with these things. Facing trauma, right? Jupiter forces us to, in the 8th house at least, right? To deal with these sorts of things. It's not always fun, right? But it's necessary, and we feel relieved and better afterwards and more well-adjusted, right? Jupiter rules the 6th house here and the 3rd house. So there could be difficult situations around siblings, right? There could be, if you have a sibling who's got a drug problem or, a substance problem in general, or is involved in criminal activities in some way, excuse me, he may get, or she or whoever may get luck with that. And it may be sort of enterprising for a bit. But once Jupiter goes into Gemini, it won't be. They'll have a fall. And then also when it comes to the 6th house, something about the daily, I'd look at them like maybe you have an enemy die. But that's way too, that's more of a extreme example of what that could be. But I would say medical debt oftentimes, or excuse me, or learning, you see, the 6th house is often enemies and injuries and illnesses. There could be some sort of gain, if you will, through one of those things. An injury, an enemy, an illness. There's different ways that could happen. But maybe an enemy gets exposed or someone talking shit about you at work gets exposed, right? So there's that. Jupiter rules here. Oh, we already said the 3rd house and the 6th house. That's what we were talking about. So, but the eighth house hopefully will bring in a little bit more economic prosperity too. Hopefully you pay some stuff down or you see a raise or something. Let's move on to Scorpio rising. Jupiter's entering the 7th house, which is fun. Excuse me. And he'll be there for a year. Excuse me. Very wonderful. Venus will be there for a year. Sorry, Jupiter will be there for a year. Again, this could be a time, when you start a new relationship or you rekindle an existing one. You make it flourish again. You start to do things together again. You start to have that relating energy again, because oftentimes you have this sense of growing apart and being roommates and all that sort of stuff. And we have to keep falling in love over and over again, right? It's an endless process. Relationships take lifelong work. If you want a lifelong relationship, I mean, I wouldn't know because I haven't lived lifelong yet. And most of my relationships have ended up, so. Now, Jupiter rules the 5th house here and the 2nd house, which is a lovely thing for these Scorpio risings, because the 5th house brings pleasure and fun into an angular house here, the 7th house. So you see there's enjoyment and sex sort of implied, and perhaps even stuff to do with our children, in a beneficial way because it's Jupiter. So, so you could see this, this fun, playful, romantic dynamic that may come up again over this period. And then the 2nd house. So leading in some way to economic prosperity, perhaps. Getting, maybe a partner bringing certain value or even, literal money to a relationship. Let's go to the next one. Oh, my dear Sagittarians, I love you. I love you, my Sages. My Sages. What's up, my Sag? So this is your 1st house ruler. And Jupiter's entering your 6th house. When we see Jupiter go into there, it's often a great time to start cleaning up our life. To get all this shit done that we don't want to do. We may take up, a health routine. Whether that's eating, nutrition. I hate the word diet. But nutrition. It could be exercise. It could be trying to organize your space, organize your life, stand up for yourself, right? All these sorts of things. It's where Mars finds his joy, which is why we see enemies and conflicts there. So, use that to your advantage and stand up for yourself. So anyway, Jupiter rules the 1st and 4th houses, both angular houses, which is quite interesting and, auspicious in a way, even though Jupiter's in the 6th house. So, I mean, this could be bodily injuries and stuff that affects you because it's the 1st house ruler, right? And again, you will see bodily injuries. You'll see, perhaps even surgeries or prolonged, health things that you need to take care of, right? And you can start taking care of all these. So let's move on here. Oh, in the 4th house here. So conflicts with your parents or your father. Or again, it could be coming to a détente or a truce in some way. Next, we have Capricorn, which means Jupiter's going into your 5th house, which is very, very nice, right? The house of fun here being highlighted. This is definitely a time to start enjoying yourself again, especially over the next year while Jupiter's here, right? Because then it's going to be sort of tedious when Jupiter goes into Gemini. But for now, for this year, enjoy yourself, right? And Jupiter rules the third house and the 12th house. So watch out for romantic partners who have addiction issues or, some difficult mental illness that you're not equipped to handle, right? So, but also the third house, extended family, having fun with extended family or siblings in some way, playing games with siblings or family. Excuse me. We could also see things like, dirty talk, sexual playfulness, things like that. Things to do with our children in school. Spelling bees, specifically around speaking and things like that in words. Jupiter rules the third house. We talked about that. And we talked about the 12th house. Excuse me. But this should definitely be a time of luck for your children or for you around romance. So, or at least I'm so hoping. It could have to do with your artistic expression. It could have to do with political work. And it could have to do with a small business venture. Could have to do with sex or sex work. It could also have to do with gambling, sports, games, things like that. Politics. Aquarius rising, that's me. Jupiter's entering the 4th house of the parents' home family. So we may see some luck when it comes to our parents or our home situation. I'm hoping that, I can afford all this shit, for a consistent amount of time. So hopefully that all works with Jupiter being lucky here. And Jupiter rules my 2nd house. So I don't know, getting some money from my living situation. I guess we'll see. And then he also rules my 11th house. So having friends in some way help me with my living situation. Either bringing it, Venusian sign Taurus, making it beautiful again, or organizing it, because Venus rules cleanliness and beauty. It could also be, my mom getting better, or her health getting better. Could be something to do with that. It could be real estate. It could be, a small influx of money from the living situation, a home sale, rent, land, property, if you have any of that stuff. Also, the 4th house rules generational wealth and family wealth. It also rules precious things found in the ground, like oil, right? Like precious gems and stones or metals that you find in the ground or mining, because the 4th house was the deepest, darkest part of the chart. So now for Pisces rising, Jupiter rules the 1st house and the 10th house, which is pretty auspicious. But then Jupiter goes into the 3rd house, right? So with Jupiter going into the 3rd house, if people are going to school or in school, you could see things improve quite a bit. Maybe you're getting more work done. Maybe you get more help from teachers. Maybe you have TAs. I think of the 3rd house more as TAs and the 9th house as professors. Helping you along your way when it comes to exams, perhaps. I think of exams in the 3rd house. I think of, writing, speaking projects. I think of presentations. Similar things like that. So, excuse me. And then Jupiter, like I said, rules the 1st and 10th house. So this is where you're sort of selling yourself. And these could be things that make you more prominent in some way. But don't worry, because luck is on your side for the most part. Who else do we have here? Oh, wait. That's Pisces. We're done. So anyway, who wants to put their chart up? We'll do a couple of charts. We'll do a couple charts. Coochie Pachi, Lydia. Let's see. Let's see if anyone. Do. Sorry, I haven't been looking at the chat lately. I'm sorry. Because I was talking so much. Jupiter and Taurus is going to be an experience, yes. You hope I'm well? I am, but I bashed up my knee pretty bad. Moving this desk. One of my dear friends had the wonderful idea to make my space more professional and move my desk to the living room. But I got no internet signal out there, so my last live was going on and off, which is why I didn't go on last week so much. Or, sorry, rather earlier in the week so much. Synastry reading for Lydia. We'll look at some of Lydia really quick. A little bit of Lydia, something. A little bit of Lydia. Charts. New. Or do I already have Lydia's chart from a previous thing? Let's see if I have Lydia. Maybe this is you. Lydia. June 4th. Okay, I do. 1998. And then this other person. Lydia person. '27. 98. Dude! Oh my God. Enter a valid date code. This date is not a valid calendar date. Oh, what am I typing wrong? 27. I wrote 57. It's the 57th day of the month. 12:52 a.m. in Waterford, Wisconsin. 12:52 a.m. Waterford. Okay. So your 7th house ruler is Jupiter in the 10th. And his 7th house ruler is Jupiter in the 10th. Are you serious? You're both Gemini risings? Fucking kidding me. Well, that's boring. So Jupiters are the most relationship-oriented thing for you. Although he has retrograde Jupiter. And you don't. And you don't. So let's look at the Synastry wheel, and then we'll go on to the next person. So let me look for really bad stuff first. So first things off the bat, Saturn and Mars. So Saturn, your Saturn, Lydia, is opposite their moon. So it's going to feel to that person, to him or whoever they are, like their emotions get trampled by you. Maybe, you're perceived as controlling. I don't know. Maybe you're the more like masculine or dominant influence. Again, I don't know. But Mars is also square the sun, which can lead to conflicts. The Mars person starts feeling like the sun person is being condescending or smarty pants or something like that, you see? Venus opposite the moon. Now, this is where we get sort of paranoid that our person is going to find someone cuter or better or whatever. It's this sort of paranoia. It's a problem with being able to feel secure with the partner. So that's how, he will feel. If he's a he will be a bit nervous about losing you to someone more handsome or stronger or faster or smarter or with more money or whatever. Now, your Neptune is also square his moon. So you would have to be careful here about seeing each other through rose-colored glasses, right? Which, can lead to toxic relationships because we end up apologizing for people's red flags. Now, Mars is square the sun. And that, like I said, that can lead to conflicts. Oh, we just talked about that. Pluto is square the sun, which, it shatters us into pieces until we have to put ourselves back together. So, and we're never the same. We're always sort of wounded, but we're still the same people in a way at our core. So, Mars square Venus, his Mars square your Venus isn't that bad. It's like sexual games and healthy sexual competition and friction. You just have to watch out it doesn't devolve into bickering. Mars square Saturn. This is probably one of the worst aspects to have in synastry. So just watch out because the Mars person feels like the Saturn person is trying to control them. And they take it for a little bit and then they explode eventually. So just be aware of that. But Venus trine the sun, your Venus trine his sun is lovely. It's really lovely. It's deep attraction, right? You make him feel seen and you make him feel beautiful and he makes you feel seen. And what do I mean by seen? I mean, you feel confident and beautiful and you feel noticed, right? You feel like you can show off a little bit. So that's a lovely thing to have. Excuse me. Uranus opposite his Venus, it could be a kink thing or polyamorous, perhaps. Anyway, oh gosh, and Pluto, his Pluto opposite your Sun, your Mercury, and your Mars. Those are all pretty difficult. So you might also feel stifled and backed into a corner oftentimes. So again, just be aware of this. Let's move on to the next person. Next person. Coochie patchy, coochie patchy. Coochie patchy. Coochie patchy. I thought I had it. Coochie patchy, coochie patchy. Oops. Coochie patchy. Oops. Okay. 3:10, 88, 11 a.m. San Salvador. So hopefully this is the right information because I am dyslexic. And 1998. Wait, no, 1987? No, 1988. See, I'm going to do my best here. If I make a mistake, you're shit out of luck. I'm sorry. So, because I don't have time to sit here and redo things or correct things. So you're shit out of luck. If I make a mistake, I'm sorry. San Salvador, El Salvador. Yeah, select. What's your problem? G. Patchy person. $10 p.m. Dude. San Salvador, El Salvador. Okay, I guess it worked on there. Your 7th house ruler. Fuck. I'm so over these Gemini risings. I've had 4. Please don't be a Gemini rising. Thank God. Oh, well, it's Mercury again. And it's Jupiter again. You people are so boring. You people are so goddamn boring. Jupiter in the 12th house. You're attracted to drug addicts and mentally ill people. So hopefully this guy isn't one, or this person. So where's Mercury? Where's Mercury? Where's Mercury? Oh yeah, 6th house. Well, I don't know. 1st house ruler in the 6th house. This person is attracted to people who sort of excuse me. This person might be attracted either to clingy people. They might be sort of clingy themselves, right? There might be some codependency stuff either in this person or the people they go through or they go for. When you see the 7th house ruler in the 7th house, it's pretty auspicious, but especially it being Jupiter. I mean, so he probably has luck in relationships and all that sort of stuff, or, you know, had some lucky relationships or something. Is Jupiter being affected? Saturn square Jupiter. So it's not all good with him. It hasn't been all good. Sorry, my sound. So it hasn't been all good in relationships with him. Anyway, let's see the Synastry reel because I don't want to. The Synastry grid because I don't want to beat a dead horse and I want to hit a couple more people. So there's some difficulties. See, Saturn square Mars right off the bat again. And then his Saturn square your sun. So your Saturn square his Mars, like we just talked about. It's that feeling of being pushed into a corner. I often use that joke symbolism of, you know, the crocodile and Peter Pan trying to eat Dr. Hook, Captain Hook, and Dr. Hook. Dr. Hook was a musician. Captain Hook, you know, when Captain Hook is trying to escape the jaws of the crocodile in Peter Pan, and is like trying to force his way out. That's how I think of the Mars person and the Saturn person. The Saturn person is like a crocodile, and the Mars person is trying to escape. The Mars person eventually gets backed into a corner, and then they explode or react or whatever against the Saturn person's perceived, I say perceived because you don't know that you're doing it for sure, but perceived sort of, you know, oppression or rules or, you know, that sort of stuff. You know, this is the way you should do it. So, you know, for example, I had partners that tried to tell me, this is the way you fold clothes. This is the way you wash dishes. This is the way I want it. This is the way. This is the way. So, you know, it doesn't mean it can't work just fine. It's just be aware of that dynamic. And everything can be really settled through sincere love and communication and honesty. So, his Saturn conjunct your moon, on the one hand, that could be, and your Saturn trine his moon. On the one hand, these are things that can be useful for longevity in a relationship and having a long-term relationship. But his Saturn is also square your sun. So this is you perhaps feeling restricted, or maybe they whittle down your confidence, or maybe they make you feel like, you know, less. I lost my train of thought. You feel demeaned or small or sort of sat on in some way. You feel like your light has been diminished, I guess. Right. Let's look for some good stuff before. Let's look for some good stuff. Some good stuff. Mars square Mars, that's bickering. What's some good stuff? Well, his Venus is on your descendant, opposite, or his Venus, sorry, is opposite your ascendant, meaning it's on your descendant. So that would make him really attractive to you, and probably attractive to him as well. So good ones. His Neptune trine your Venus. That's very romantic, idyllic love. His Mars trine your Moon. Just watch out having babies. I mean, you could have babies with Mars, Moon stuff, pregnancy. But, there's also this sense of, it can be very good for sex, really. His Pluto opposite your Venus, this can be difficult and it can be creepy. It's definitely hot in the beginning. Any Pluto Venus aspect is. But this can devolve into creepy territory. What happens is Pluto is scared to lose Venus, just like the Persephone myth, right? Persephone's like, yo, Hades, my mom's basically destroying the planet with perpetual winter and people are passing away and all this. I just need to go to the surface so she stops hurting people. And Pluto's like, or Pluto, or whatever you want to call him, Hades, Pluto, it's all whatever. Hands pomegranate seeds, right? Like, okay, I totally trust you, girl. Here's some pomegranate seeds that are going to tie you to the underworld, right? Because he's paranoid. He's scared of losing her. Pluto tries to arrange everything to keep Persephone or Venus, right? This is the sort of archetype between them. And Venus can get creeped out when Pluto tries too hard. And she can be like, oh, God. And she could start having a wandering eye and going off into things. And Pluto gets obsessive. And that can sort of devolve into jealousy and all sorts of toxic things. It doesn't mean it can't work. It doesn't mean it can't work. I mean, it can be all sorts of wonderful intensity. And you can work through some of these things, right? Pluto's sort of paranoia and Venus's, either losing interest or getting creeped out in some way by communicating these things and what's actually going on under the surface. So anyway, let's go to the next one. Who else is here? Besides Coochie. Where is this? You got the polyamorous thing right. You like a lot of what I said. So, well, I don't know. My voice is so relaxing. Why, thank you. You are so sweet, Queen of Cups. You are so sweet. Larissa, it's okay if you just do your own chart. Larissa explains it all. Didn't I just... Oh, wait, that's Lydia. You wish you had your name in Mambo. A little bit of Lydia in my something. Can I do Synastry for you and your partner? I'm going to get to a couple more. Hector! Hello, my darling. Hello. Who else is here? Hello. Oh, hello. Pisces, Sun, Aqua rising. That's okay. I guess. That's okay. That would put... Oh, yeah. The Sun would rule your 7th house. Alice in Chains. Larissa explains it all. Larissa. LaRusso. Daniel LaRusso. You're going down, LaRusso. That's Karate Kid. You're going down, LaRusso. Okay, Lydia. I saw Lydia. Larissa. Okay, here's Larissa. I've already had your chart, Larissa. I've already done your chart. Oh my gosh. I've already done your chart. Or I guess it's Synastry. Larissa explains it all. Let's see. Larissa. Oh, we do have Larissa in here. Taronga, New Zealand. Old Zealand. Him is 11:58 p.m., 14th of April, 1995. Larissa. Person. 14 April. So 1495. 11:58 p.m. It's the same time I was born. And same place. Let's see. Larissa is also a fucking Gemini rising. Wonderful. Ugh. Why do you all have to be Gemini rising? Why? Why? If you really loved me, you would have been born at a different time. I'm just kidding. I saw that in the meme. It's such a narcissistic thing to say. But I saw it in the meme. So anyway. Larissa. Wait, can we not see this? Jesus Christus. No, I don't want that. I don't want that. I want an Oompa Loompa, Daddy. I want one now. I don't care how. I want it now. Don't care how. I want it now. Okay, there we go. Larissa. Daniel Larissa. Okay.
Jupiter again. Jupiter rules the 10th house.
Oh, lucky you, Larissa. You got your 7th house ruler in the 10th house in his own home. I mean, this is very prominent for success in some way, although you do have Saturn conjunct your actual midheaven. So that delays things and slows them down a bit. And Saturn is unhappy. So that's wonderful. Saturn's also going through your 10th house. So opportunities, on the one hand, are going to sort of, they feel perhaps like they slip through your fingers. But at the same time, you have these wonderful opportunities. Well, Jupiter entering your 12th house. Gosh, we already talked about all this. The one thing I didn't mention is you could meet a therapist or a teacher or someone that helps you improve either your mental health situation or something that's been, causing you a lot of depression or anxiety. You could go into recovery, I guess. We talked about the beneficial and healing seclusion. We've already talked about all that. So anyway, I'm not supposed to be doing Synastry. So anyway, look, we have an Aquarius rising. We've had 3 Aquarius risings, including me, which is, look, his rising is like exactly conjunct mine. Mine is 54. And his ascendant is also conjunct Altair. So there's something bold and adventurous about this cat. And his sun is in the 3rd house, exalted in Aries, which means he probably has some luck with relationships, but Mars is in the 7th house. So that could be breakups, divorces, and things like that. Fights with spouses or conflicts in some way, So anyway, and Jupiter is entering the 4th house, right? Which we did talk about a little bit already. Luck with parents, land, real estate, your living situation, finding a new place, perhaps. Getting a price break on a place, finding a more economical place, a place that allows the stuff that you need to do or the amenities that you need. Like, I really need a pool. Like, find a place with a pool. At least as things get warmer. And then you have Jupiter in domicile like I do in the 11th house. So you see, that's good for his money situation, hopefully, but it's retrograde like mine. So money doesn't happen until, he's probably around 39 or 40 or something, or maybe even 42, because that's a Saturn turn, a 7-year multiple. I lost my train of thought. Oh, fourth house. So Jupiter's coming out of the third house, which tends to be a whirlwind of writing and speaking and expressing. Like I made a shitload of content. Oftentimes, our siblings can get a little luck. We can get help with our schooling. We can take on an educational project or whatever, And then in the fourth house, like I said, it's beautifying your space, right? Again, we talked about generational wealth and stuff with parents and yada yada yada. Maybe your parents get lucky with money or something fun, right? So, and you could see friends that help you out in your situation as well, either with moving or getting you leads on whatever it is. So, doodly doodly doo. Who's? Oh wait, I'm supposed to be doing fucking Synastry, dude. What is wrong with me? I don't know the lyrics to that song, except for this one, except for the part where she goes, I wanna go. Oh, wait. I wanna know how far I'll go. I love Moana. I just don't know the lyrics to the songs. I should, but I don't. Damn. Everyone's got Saturn Mars shit. Look at that. His Saturn or their Saturn opposite your Mars. So this is where you feel like you need to break free probably after a certain point. Maybe he feels oppressive. Maybe he feels like he, tries to tell you what to do or to tell you who to see. Right? I think of that song. Don't tell me what to do and don't tell me what to say. And when I go out with you, don't put me on display. I like being put on display personally, but another thing. But you see what it is. It's like that control thing, pushing back against control. Saturn, his Saturn square your Mercury. You could feel like your ideas get trampled or like you're not heard, perhaps. But his Venus is trine your sun, so he makes you feel quite attractive, perhaps. Tells you you're beautiful. Either that or you do the opposite or do the other way to him. Excuse me. But, maybe you bring him attention. Maybe you bring him attention or build up his confidence in some way. His Venus is opposite your Mars, so maybe you're the one that initiates sexual stuff or sexual contact. Oftentimes, this is like sexual games, playing games with each other, stuff like that. Like, texting each other like, I'm going to get you so good. When I get home, I'm going to tie you up. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that, right? They're telling you all the shit that they're going to do. And then you're like, you motherfucker, like, I'm going to... stuff like that. Like sending each other dirty texts, egging each other on. The problem is that eventually with familiarity, it can turn into a little bit of bickering. It can turn into like not having good timing for sex. Like one person's in the mood, the other person's like, oh, leave me alone. I want to right now. I mean, of course, you have to be honest and everything. But it's a timing thing quite often, you see. One person's in the mood and one person's not. Your Jupiter conjunct his Venus. This is really good too. I mean, for a love relationship, because Jupiter really pumps Venus up, right? Gives Venus compliments, makes Venus feel confident, makes Venus feel proud, right? Makes Venus feel intelligent or understanding or deep in some way, right? Jupiter can also take Venus under her wing a little bit. So, guide Venus a little bit, educate Venus, Maybe gently give Venus some fashion tips, or maybe the other way around. Maybe they give you some fashion tips. Anything important else? Anything important else? Well, your Venus, your Sun, and your Moon all conjunct his Pluto. That can be a wild one. You're a real wild one, wild one. That's Iggy Pop. Iggy and the Stooges. Now I wanna be your dog. I love that song. I love that song so much. Iggy Pop, for those of you who know Iggy and the Stooges. Your Pluto sextile his moon or their moon or whatever. I just keep saying his because most of you out there with guys. So at least in my experience. So this is a life-changing relationship and it's very hard to break up. He can get obsessive or stalkerish, perhaps, or you could, right? But this is very hard to break up. It can be very hot and sexual, especially in the beginning. Like it's the sort of thing where we tell each other everything. We want to go to hell together and come back, you know. I think of like for me when I have these aspects, I'm like, you know, spit your blood into my mouth, mommy, please. You know. Please, please, please. We share our traumas and our pain. You have to watch out though, you don't do trauma bonding because this creates a toxic situation where our relationship is founded on all this pain bullshit, right? So we you know, that's erected upon a shaky foundation. So anyway, you just have to be careful with that. Intensity is wonderful. But you can't be intense all the time. It's a sense of urgency and stress, you know. So let's see who else we have here. Let's see who else we have here. Why does Chrome do that? Why does Chrome close? Okay. Steve Powell. Steve Powell from Hungary. From Hungary. Pardon me if I do not like Viktor Orban. Pardon me if I'm not fond of all that stuff. A certain political party here in the United States keeps going over there to get lessons from him. And I think that's quite disgusting. But here we go. Orban. So this is Steve Powell. Steve, my pal. 1975. 1927. Deb. And then Steve Person. Steve Person. Okay. Oops, I had Hungary there. The Austro-Hungarian Empire. Sorry. Stupid history brain. The Habsburgs. I don't know why I keep doing that. Steve Powell, thank God you're not a Gemini. Oh, Gemini rising. Or Virgo rising. Or Aquarius or Leo rising. Oh my goodness. Or Pisces rising for that matter. Or Sag rising. Oh my God. Okay, well, so this is good. You see, we have the 7th house ruler is Mars, which we'll see how that goes. Maybe attracted to people who have their shit together, who aren't, you know, a mess, have their own money and livelihood. You don't want to have to stress probably over other people's stuff and situation. You know, maybe you get pulled into these relationships and all of a sudden they start, you know, trying to get you to pay for shit for them, you know, trying to get you to shoulder their financial stuff here and there. Well, you're entering an interesting phase of life. Time to lick your wounds and heal yourself in a cocoon. Oh, now this person's a Virgo rising. So Jupiter, again, they're having their Jupiter return. So wonderful in the ninth house. This is sort of a spiritual and philosophical type person, probably. One of the women I've been in love with for a while. She's got Jupiter and Taurus in the ninth house like that, at the top of the chart. She's Virgo rising. Very intelligent and a Libra moon. That's very interesting. You're a Libra Pluto, though. And Pluto conjunct, or not you, this is your person. They got mama drama. They got some sort of pain or maybe bipolar disorder. Depression, some mental health issues. Okay. I sound like Little John. Okay. What? Libra. Okay. Excuse me. I wonder if you ever had a teacher or mentor pass away. They did, if they ever did. Now, Synastry grid. Steve Powell. And Steve Powell person. Okay, looking for bad stuff. First. The difficult thing. When the dogs bite, when the bees sting, when you're feeling sad, I just think of a few of my favorite things, and then I don't feel so bad. Okay, so his Neptune, square your moon. You're going to avoid the red flags. You're not going to see, or you probably see them, but you'll apologize for them and explain them away. There's probably lying on one side or the other. I'd expect on his side because it's his Neptune, but it could be either way. But you don't see things clearly. And your moon is conjunct his ascendant. So this is a very close sort of bond. You sort of latched onto him pretty quick, probably. When you see the sun, moon, or Venus conjunct the ascendant, like that's a big deal. Big deal. Moon opposite the sun. You might feel a bit insecure in the relationship. Saturn square your ascendant. That can be quite difficult. This is sort of a reckoning. It disciplines you. There's difficult situations implicit in this. And it could be because, he has expectations or he wants certain things and, he might expect you to change to fulfill his desires or whatever. But you got to stay true to yourself. The most important thing is being yourself. My motto is I'd rather be myself than be with anyone else. So, take that for what you will. Your Pluto conjunct her moon or their moon. Again, that's a very difficult bond to break. It gets very close. We grow roots into each other. We share our blood, right? We share our veins. We go to hell together and come back. Sex and orgasm is like death and resurrection. This is a dramatic big thing. So it doesn't end very well, typically. Your Neptune square his sun. Again, that's, avoiding red flags. Some good stuff. Your Venus conjunct his moon, right? This is very attractive and lovely. He's probably very attracted to you, and you make him feel more attractive. Oops. Your Jupiter opposite his moon. The benefic thing isn't bad, but, it can lead to sort of self-indulgence, egging each other on, Excuse me. Venus opposite Venus. That actually isn't bad. That's a very sort of compelling energy, and it can be attractive both ways, obviously. Venus is attracted to Venus. She's mirroring herself to herself. And that can be good for For a romantic bond, for sex, or for friendship. Oh, her Mars trying your Venus very closely, so the sex would be very good, very hot, but she would probably be the more male influence or the initiator or the what's the word? The controller. What's the word? The more dominant person, rather. Right? Her Jupiter trying your moon, she might make you feel safe or make you feel like, secure, your confidence boosted, things like that. So, and then their Pluto conjunct your Venus. So again, another signature of this being a very difficult, deep relationship. I mean, very sort of hot, very deep, but just very hard to untangle the drama or the emotions or the jealousy, perhaps, or the possessiveness, right? Or the obsession. You'll see all those things with these Pluto contacts. But it is very, very hot, and it does go deep. And there's a quality about this that is not only life-changing, but helps you sort of become aware of parts of yourself. So anyway, you've been listening to this the whole time, not check. Oh my gosh, you poor baby. Listening to me the whole time? I'm a pain in the butt. It calls me. It calls me. I want to know how far it goes. So, raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens. You only had a child after your first year of dating. Yeah. Well, there you go. Sometimes I'm right. Drops on roses and whiskers on kittens. Like the stream now, or I will take your cat and boil him in my pot for something tasty. I don't know. When the dogs bite, when the bees sting, please like the stream right now. And subscribe to my channel and share it with friends. And then I will feel so proud. I just made that up. That was funny. Dirty texting and bickering. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. The most wonderful thing about Tigers is that I'm the only one. I'm the only one. So if there's nothing else, we'll say, hey, excuse me, I'm planning on doing another live tomorrow. Hopefully. And for those of you who are interested, I'm going to be doing June horoscopes for my Patreon subscribers. So just be aware. Just be aware. For my $5 subscribers, I will be doing June horoscopes for each rising sign. So please, 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 please consider it. And that's the full month of June. All the fun stuff that'll be happening to you, including Venus retrograde. Venus goes retrograde, right? She enters Leo early in June and goes retrograde later. Oh, wait, maybe that's not in June. Maybe that's July. I think that's July. Or maybe August. But Venus enters Leo, and that will be fun for all of us Aquarius risings because hopefully we will be meeting people. I mean, I have already, but, I want to meet couples, more couples. I have a couple on deck, but I wasn't available this past weekend, and everyone's like hot to trot. Like, don't care how I want it now. So anyway, I love you all. Oh, that was my notifications. I love you all. I hope you have a wonderful whatever you're having. And please I'm going to post this on Facebook. So if you're on Facebook following me, just comment, and comment on this post if on this video, if you have any interesting Jupiter experiences, or if you have Jupiter in Taurus and you're about to start your return, and what your Jupiter experience has been maybe through Aries. Let us know. It would be wonderful to hear. Plus, it helps with the algorithm and all that bullshit. So, now I got to talk for another 7 seconds because I just cussed. You can't cuss. Oh, wait, 15 seconds. And like the first or last 15 seconds of a video. So anyway, I'm going to post this on Facebook. So please comment and please let other people know that this is fun and that you enjoy it and that this is great. And we talk about fun stuff and we go over charts and you get horoscopes, some of you. And for those of you who don't get your chart read, you often get to hear this stuff about your chart because we go over many rising signs. So anyway, I love you all. Have a wonderful whatever you're having. And